Ari, good afternoon. Thank
Good
you.
afternoon.
Thank you again for being with us and doing this with us. It means a lot to a lot of people. We've had a lot of requests for this session today, and we're very appreciative. So let's jump right in with the topic that I think is foremost on everyone's mind, Iran. But I'm not going to start in the place everyone expects. You've been following this story for almost 20 years. You spoke about Iran before many others, and you understand the larger context of Israel's actions, recent actions, I think, as well as anybody. So before we get to the activities of the last few weeks, can you just set the stage for us about how you see this fitting into the last 20 years of history, but 20 years in 2 minutes?
So thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. It's a pleasure as always, and it's a special pleasure now because there is a moment of real, hope with some concern as well, which we'll discuss. Look, to put it, first of all, I do think we are, what was so interesting about the Iran challenge, and still is, that on the one hand, it was so clear to some of us that it's the most dramatic issue of the time. We have some people on our Zoom call that were obsessed with this, and for a good reason. But generally, the wider public and political establishments had a difficulty addressing it because it seemed vague. And suddenly it becomes concrete and huge. So if I may, I just want to say that I do think that there are like three relevant historical comparisons or that we have to refer to. One is the 1940 analogy. And I would say it's a 1933 analogy because Iran had the potential of becoming a Nazi Germany regarding the Jewish people and regarding the world. The fact that we addressed it in 1933 rather than 1940 puts us in a much better position. But for decades, it was very difficult to get leaders and elites to understand how dramatic. I've been following it since 2007. There were a bunch of us, again, some of us on this call that were into it. Many people thought we were crazy. Maybe many people thought it was an abstract issue. And because of that, usually on these conversations, I'm very careful with American politics and leaders. But if I may say so, 4 different American presidents failed. George W. Bush went to Iraq. I always said there was a spelling mistake in that war. Rather than address Iran, you didn't need war then, but you had to address it. Barack Obama failed in bringing a good agreement. The agreement was not a good agreement. Trump won, went out of the agreement, creating even a worse situation, and Biden was perceived as not strong enough. So 4 American presidents failed in addressing this, while it was relatively easy to address it. But the same applies to Israel. Israel did wonders, as we now see, intelligence-wise and so on, but we failed in stopping the enrichment project of Iran. So the spectacular success of these last few weeks is an outcome of a failure, actually, because we should have been addressing this in 2004 and 2007 and 2010 when it was much easier to address. We actually acted at the very last moment. But I want to be positive. So I'll say I really think that we all should get out of our kind of, Israelis tend to be cynical. Okay, I'll tell you an Israeli story, 2 Israeli stories to end this opening. When the first Iranian ballistic missile attack came in April of last year, my colleague was the military correspondent, was standing at the rooftop of a Tel Aviv skyscraper. He knew from his sources in the military that something horrible is happening. 110 ballistic missiles. It's an unprecedented ballistic attack. And his sources in the Kiryat were terrified. They prepared everything, but they didn't know what the outcome would be. And then comes this science fiction event of missiles over Tel Aviv and the aero missiles and all the drama. And as he says, half an hour later, we were quarreling whether we will order shawarma or falafel from takeaway. We have a tendency not to grasp the greatness of these historical events. So I'll end this opening. I think that the most interesting comparison here is to 1967, and we'll probably get back to that. One of my friends that many of you know was a combat fighter in 1967, very young. And he described to me how when his plane took off from Lod Airport, at the time it was Lod, they were hovering over the Negev, flying very low in total silence. And he looked around him, it was like a 25-year-old or 27-year-old pilot, and he said, out of tiny little poor Israel, suddenly came out like a mythological force. Suddenly we were going to change the Middle East, this tiny little vulnerable country. This is what happened now. Israel is not as weak as it was in 1967. But for 20 years, 10 years, 5 years, we did our best to destroy ourselves, to weaken ourselves, to divide ourselves. And suddenly, within 2 weeks, 12 days, you saw this immense, amazing Israeli power, but it's not just power, talent, conviction, commitment, planning, the best of Israel. And Israel leading the world. In this sense, it is a bit like, again, making the British comparison. So I think that before we get into the details, we should all appreciate, we say in Hebrew, zachinu. We had the right to live, and we have the right to live, in a momentous historical moment that has huge implications and, in a sense, changes the narrative regarding Israel in a very dramatic way.
Well, that sets it up perfectly then for the recent activity. Ari, why did Israel attack when it did?
There was, again, it goes back, in many ways, it's too late. It was like the last moment. But specifically what happened here is there was a unique combination of threat and opportunity. The threat had 3-4 dimensions. One, Iran, the Iranian enrichment program succeeded in a big way. These famous 408 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60%, which allows them to manufacture 9 to 10 bombs. This is unacceptable. This is beyond any red line. And this happened recently. The deterioration in the sense of the increasement of enrichment activity has been mind-boggling in the last 4 or 5 years, and it came to a climax. Number two, there were signs of Iran going back to weaponization. The Iraq war failed in Iraq in many ways. It succeeded in 2 places. It succeeded in Tripoli, Libya, and succeeded in Tehran, Iran. Libya abandoned its nuclear program after the Iraq war, and Iran froze its military program. They went on with enrichment, but they stopped dealing with the weaponization because they were terrified they will be attacked. In the last months, there have been more and more signs that they are going back to weaponization. So the combination of so much fissile material with the beginning of weaponization, a renewed weaponization program, created a threat we cannot live with. So that was the second element. The third element, that we have discovered that the Iranians are about to intensify their ballistic missile capability. They were going to manufacture 300 missiles a month, 3,600 a year. This is something that Israel cannot live with. So the threat had these 3 dimensions. On the other hand, there was a unique opportunity. And look, I'm not a religious person, but all the stars were aligned here in almost mystical way. Okay, there was some wisdom here, but so number one is we basically destroyed or weakened dramatically Hezbollah back in the last autumn. Hezbollah was the main threat. When we were worried about the military option 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the main problem was Hezbollah that had such fire capability that would have endangered Israel. So Hezbollah nearly gone, as a matter of fact, gone. It was not relevant. That's number one. 2, Syria. And remember this, Syria was the key to war, and later on we'll say Syria is the key to peace. The change of the regime back in Syria, and then the Israeli activity that destroyed the Syrian air defenses, made this possible in a way. Look, I've been talking actually today, a few hours ago, to one of the heroes who led this operation, who planned this operation and actually flew in this operation. And he said, we've been struggling with this for so many years. Suddenly having Syria open for us was like magic. I mean, it made it so much easier than before. The third element was the International Nuclear Agency's report, which came at the last moment. Israel was already planning it, but it gave a kind of legitimacy because it said the Iranians are the villains. They broke all the rules. So it gave us, in an era where Israel has serious legitimacy problems, suddenly on this issue, we had legitimacy. And the fourth element, which I'm sure we will discuss more, was Trump. I mean, there was, and again, I'll say it cautiously, there was a moment that this was going to happen at the very end of the Biden administration. There was talk of this happening back in January. But, and we'll talk about later, the dialogue between the Israelis and the new administration created a totally new kind of opportunity. So, in a sense, although it's such, excuse my emotions, but it's a really heroic decision. But in a sense, it was easy. Because we say in Hebrew, en brera. This was a war of no choice. We were existentially threatened, on the one hand, in a very clear way, and there was a golden opportunity. So although the details and the need to build it up was complicated, actually, if had I been a cabinet minister, no question about it. It was, we should have done it many years ago, after we failed in doing it before. This was the last moment to do it, and it was such a combination of threat and opportunity that the answer was very clear.
So that's fascinating. My next question was going to be to really take a moment and talk about the amazing planning and patience and genius of the Israeli operation. But I want to ask along with that, was trying to knock out Hezbollah with the pagers, et cetera, always deemed a prior part of the plan? Or has that just been coincidence or fortuity that happened first? But then, just real quick on that, but then I really wanted to talk about the planning, the genius of the planning, the targeting, and putting aside for a moment what nuclear materials are left, what the planning and the targeting did accomplish. And what therefore is now gone.
So if I may, I'll get to Hezbollah in a moment. I'll give you the short history of this amazing project. In some ways, look, one of Israel's most impressive projects is Dimona, which we're not allowed to talk about. And this is a kind of new Dimona. Okay, we did it in 1981. We did it in 2007, in 1981 in Iraq, in 2007 in Syria. But this is on a total different scale. This seem to be mission impossible. So the kind of genius that went to it is really incredible. Now, again, if we have time, I'll explain more of the comparison with Dimona, which I think is very interesting. But going back to the short history of this, basically in 2004, Israel begins to plan this. It becomes serious in 2008, again, after success. After we managed to destroy the Syrian reactor in September 2007, they've decided the next thing is Iran, and we need a military option. And they started preparing. The technology was different, the situation was different, but they started preparing for this option. Then came the fascinating years. I don't know if you can recall or imagine, but once upon a time, Bibi Netanyahu and Ehud Barak were really good friends. And they were actually like twins, okay? They were working very closely together. So in the Netanyahu-Barak period, from 2009 to 2013-14, Israel is intensifying the pressure. It actually creates a robust military option. And we all didn't know, do they really mean it? Or is it a poker game intended to put pressure on the American administration? Later on, we can deal with that. But at that time, it became a serious option. Okay, then comes the GPOA at 2015, and we go dormant. Not only America, Israel went asleep for 5 years. But during that time, without getting into too many details, we developed incredible capabilities. Incredible capabilities. Blue and white. Blue and white. The Israeli high-tech industry, the Israeli military industry, with the Air Force, have done wonders. The only problem is that the politicians didn't put the shekels into the technology. Okay, so we had amazing technology, but it was not funded enough. 2020, we begin to wake up. Some of the credit goes to Naftali Bennett, who was prime minister at the time, and some to some leading generals. So from 2020, what was a plan that was like a bit abstract. On the one hand, we rehearsed, we planned, we had it, but people didn't totally take it seriously. From 2020, 2021, we begin to develop it. And then comes October 7th. And after that, the whole thing intensifies. Comes the success in Lebanon and the Trump election, and the government, the prime minister, give an instructions to the military to take this old plan that is 15 years, 20 years old in some ways, but has been upgraded many times. And the work the army and intelligence do in the last 5 months, is mind-boggling. So they took what was originally a fascinating plan, but again seemed a bit unrealistic, and they made it reality. If I'll talk about the genius here, I think there are 3 elements. One is the strategic concept of conquering the skies above Tehran. This is, and I'm telling you, I know the people who led this, no one believed it would be such a success. It was a wild, wild concept years ago. And then we developed the technology. I mean, and the term used, it's not stand off, it's stand in. We don't have American capabilities. We don't have Tomahawk missiles. So you couldn't shoot this missile. Again, Israel developed amazing weapons. Not more to be said, but amazing. No one else has it. Rafael, our great military industry, is the best in the world. No offense to Americans. It's the best in the world. And the Americans call it admitted. What they did is unbelievable. But it's this strategic concept of conquering the skies, because we understood that it's not like the Iraqi reactor or the Syrian reactor. This time, we have to take control of Iran for a long time, because we have to come time after time after time. So that's the strategic concept, and the ability to implement it is one thing. The second thing, which is, again, the technology I've said, but the second or third thing is really the intelligence. And again, I wish I could tell you more. And there is a credit fight. Of course, we are Jews, we are Israelis, we're already fighting the Mossad against the army against the Mossad. There's enough credit here for everyone. So the Mossad did amazing work, again, for 20 years, building this infrastructure. But 8200, the legendary 8200, proved how legendary it is. While it failed so much in October 7th, the work they did, so actually what we managed to do is to have total air supremacy and total intelligence supremacy. And in this sense, it's really like 1967 all over again. And I suggest we'll go back to that, because I think this is the main thing. We called it, the 67 operation was called the Moked operation. It was planned for 3 years, and it shocked the world. This is the Moked operation of 2025, with these elements of the strategic concept, the capability, the intelligence, and obviously the Israeli Air Force. You know, Tom Friedman, many years ago, wrote that Israel is Yad Vashem with an Air Force. So now this Air Force proves to be, really an astonishing organization that was able to carry out this in that actually perfect. No, I wouldn't even say nearly perfect. It's perfect. It was perfect. I mean, no one, again, I'll share one piece. I hope it's okay for me to share. We were sure that some of our planes will be shot down. The fact that this operation ended with not one Israeli plane shot down, and not, God forbid, one Israeli pilot being a POW in Tehran is...
Yep. So Ari, as a part of this, talk a bit about the kinds of targeting that particularly the intelligence you're describing enabled, and where it leaves Israel now in terms of its own safety. And what I'm talking about is the attacks on the scientists, the attacks on the conversion plant. There's a tremendous amount that we've all heard that Israel accomplished that took extraordinary planning and genius to figure out how to do it, and leaves them, I assume, in a better place. But let us know a little bit more about that. The scientists in particular, or I guess the other one is the wiping out of the entire Air Force High Command in the beginning, so that there was nobody to respond, that enabled owning the skies.
Okay, so soon we'll have to
explain a little bit about that.
Okay, so soon we have to get also to the troubling part, because I don't want us to be euphoric.
We're getting there.
And there's plenty to be worried about as well. But if we'll describe the success, look, again, I don't know how many nuclear scientists are on this among us now, but the great success is, first of all, the main thing about the nuclear project is the enrichment. Okay, we all heard about Natanz and Fordow. So basically, let me put it this way. The Israeli great success is that we nearly destroyed Iran's nuclear industrial future capabilities. But we didn't destroy their ability to do something more limited, more primitive. And that's when we get to the troubling scenarios, okay? So what's the meaning of destroying the industrial future capabilities? The main thing is enrichment, 18,000 or more centrifuges, most of them destroyed, Natanz and Fordow, and we'll talk about the American part of it. So that's number one. Number two, the manufacturing of centrifuges, which is basically gone now for a while. Number three, which is very, very important, is the conversion plant in Isfahan. Again, I don't want to bore you with the physics. This is critical, because this makes it much more difficult for the Iranians to do a breakout, because they have to convert what they have. So the conversion plant is probably as important as Fordow, or perhaps even more. And then you come to the scientists. So I must say, again, because I've been talking to all the experts I know and respect, there are two schools of thought. The establishment, the Netanyahu group, believe this is the greatest success. And their narrative is, they told us there's no sense in a military option because they have all the information in their heads. Okay, now they don't have heads. That's the one approach, okay? That killing the 20 most brilliant, and in this sense, the killing of the nuclear scientists much more important than generals and so on, because they're unique. They were really, the Oppenheimers of Iran, and so the other school of thought says, if you take any military industrial complex, excuse my Eisenhower language, and you kill the top 10, 20, you still have hundreds and thousands of people who have the know-how, and sooner or later they'll be back. So I'm putting it to you. There are some think that this is the most important of all the operation. Some think it's not that important, and I'll get into, again, what I think is very important. But again, I want to explain. The need to do this is actually an expression of the failure, because this was the last resort, because we should have stopped the enrichment. We failed in stopping the enrichment. So killing the scientists is the last resort vis-a-vis the weaponization, because the weaponization can happen in any underground parking lot. With a small, if you have the know-how, it's much more difficult to detect, even with amazing intelligence. So the jury is still out. Is it, as the Netanyahu people and some senior people in the military think, that this is actually the greatest success? Obviously, by the way, the way it was done, the information is like, I mean, this can, you can have 20 Hollywood films now based on what happened here. So the operative success is astonishing. But whether this is really the strategic change, that's not clear. But I want to, if I may, Nicole, take it a step further. All this is hardware. All this is hardware. We hope that actually the software success is much more important than the hardware. Because what Israel did in this operation is 3 strategic turnarounds. One, the Iranian perception and belief, not only perception, was Israel is a spider web country. We have false power, but if you really look into us, we'll be weak and we'll be destroyed. We have moved from a spider web Israel to a paper tiger Iran. That's dramatic. That's 180 degrees. So that's the main, that's number one, the strategic issue. Number 2, the entire Iranian strategy, and we discussed it on our previous conversation, when Israel was blind, and we did see the nuclear project, but we didn't see they are strangling us, they encircled us with all these terror bases, Hezbollah, Hamas, all the others. And their strategy was, we have a border with Israel that we can attack Israel. Israel doesn't have a border with us. That's where our fear. Now it's the other way around. Because Hezbollah is so weak, because Hamas is so weak, they actually don't have a border with us. And we, with our Air Force and drones and all that, have a border with them. So that's a total shift. And the third strategic turnaround, the entire logic of the Iranian project is beyond the religious issues and the Israel issues, was to be North Korea, not Ukraine. The assumption was that if you have a nuclear program, you have an insurance policy for your regime. We turned it around. Now the nuclear project is not an asset that keeps them in power, but it's a liability that endangers the regime. So these 3 strategic developments are, in a sense, more important than any of the specifics. I mean, the specifics are important. Without them, you don't have that. But we should concentrate on them. And when we'll talk about the future, again, the optimistic scenarios and the pessimistic scenarios, we have to keep it in mind. It's not only where the enriched uranium is, which we discussed. We didn't discuss it yet, but it's this larger picture. And in this sense, we'll discuss America's intervention. I'll say another thing. The Iranians' assumption was that Israel wants to attack them and cannot attack them, and America can attack them, but what doesn't want to attack them. These 2 assumptions collapsed because Israel, if I, again, may use an American political phrase, we showed, yes, we can. We can. We don't only have the will, we have the capability. America proved to have the will. They knew that it has the capability. So the combination of Israel proving that it has the capability and America proving it has the political will is a game changer, is a dramatic changer. Again, more important than specific physics of the number of centrifuges they still have, which we should still discuss.
All right, that's incredibly helpful because the focus here is there still enriched uranium? Did they move it? Did they not move it? Is it stuck in the mountain? Is it not stuck in the mountain? Will they build a dirty bomb even if they can't build a missile, et cetera? So we do have to move on to that. But I really appreciate what you've done because I think it's incredibly important for us to understand how that last question fits in with everything else that's been accomplished in perception and the like. We were going to talk briefly about how they were so good now. And not and how October 7th failed so miserably. I don't know if you want to say a word or 2 about that.
I do think it's an interesting. I'll try to be brief. Look, I mean, the main question that really is how is it that the Israeli Air Force that couldn't reach Be'eri on the morning of October 7th reached Tehran 1,500 kilometers away in Mashhad, if you ever heard of the place, 2,300 kilometers, 1,500 miles. It's like the gap is mind-boggling. I have like 3 or 4 answers to that question. One, in the Gaza, in Be'eri, we were surprised. In Tehran, we surprised. The key to Israeli security is taking the initiative. Some of us were involved and were very generous in supporting my work. When I wrote my strategic document, Existential War, the heart of it was that we should put initiative as a pillar of our security doctrine. I'm very proud of the fact that the chief of staff, some leading generals have totally endorsed it. I'm not saying it's like only my work, but the Israeli army has transformed its strategic outlook. So what you saw here is initiative. That's the very important point. But there are some other points. One, we are a startup nation. So we are good with high-tech wars. We are bad with boots on the ground wars in the mud. We are not that bad. We've improved, but this is our forte. So we managed. This war was run where we are. 3 is what we said. We prepared for this war. In a sense, I would even say that part of our failure on October 7th was because of our success on June 30th. Because all the resources, all the attention, one of the reasons the army overlooked the Hamas danger, that they were just looking at Iran all the time. And I must tell you, I went this week to visit some of the generals who became outcasts after October 7th to say thank you. Because while they are still responsible to the failure of October 7th, they did this. So we were just not aware of it. And I felt a kind of moral need to salute them. All these people are like broken people now. Okay, and I think that while they were blind to Gaza, they were very much focused on Tehran. So, but the last element, and I think is the more profound when we get to Israel post this war, either on this conversation or the next one, the name. I hated all the names of all the Israeli military operations in the last 20 years. In fact, they were all like metallic, mechanic names invented by some computer. It was like the name of this operation is a very profound one. So there is a bit of a religious element, but rising lion, or people rises like a lioness, as if and this is what happened to us. October 7th transformed us. We were blind and we woke up. And as a result of that, a mediocre army became an army of excellence. The strategy became a focused strategy of initiative. And the people have changed. Again, the only thing that didn't change yet is Israeli politics and Israeli media. But underneath that, Israeli society and Israeli individuals are different. And what you saw here, it's not just a technical military success. Some of you know my son, Michael, who's 21 in the army, and it was a weekend, and many of his friends came. They were sitting in our garden. And I was looking at them, and I must say I had like tears in my eyes, because so many of them are the amazing heroes of the new generation. So we have this saying, Bechol dor vador, every generation, they want to kill us, and we have to rise to the challenge. And we were not sure that we still have it. We had it in 48, we had it in 67, we had it sometimes later. It was not clear. The kind of work that every 19-year-old female soldier did in intelligence, every 24-year-old pilot that went to Tehran, and this is what I'm telling you, we should appreciate that, and again, without being confused. And I soon want us to get to the troubling things, but something amazing erupted out of Israel here. We realize it's for real now, and they did amazing work, and we got also lucky. Okay, the stars were aligned, and this is why you have this outcome.
So with all of that background, which I think is essential to the next question, what is left? What do we know that you can talk about how much enriched uranium there might be? Do we just assume that it might be somewhere because we don't know? And what risk does that create of dirty bombs or the like that Israel has to now keep an eye on?
Okay, so now it's time to talk about the troubling scenarios as well. Some of us are Jews as well, so we need to we cannot be only.
Happy.
So I'll put the following metaphor. There was a semi-trailer that was going to run us over. We totally dismantled it, but out of the wreck they can create a motorcycle that can be lethal too. So the achievement of destroying the semi-trailer is very much there, but we should not be arrogant or dormant again. So what are the problems? First of all, it's the 408 kilos of 60% enriched uranium, and by the way, a lot more enriched to 20%. It's not only that. Generally, they have material, I think, for 17 bombs, 9 to 10 bombs that are really close. It seems, from what I know from all my sources, that the problem is there. It's not some or a large part of this is there, and that's the major issue. Now, the problem is, and this is the reason that this operation happened too late, because they have so much enriched uranium, they have such sophisticated centrifuges, that even if they combine the enriched uranium they probably have, or nearly for sure they have, we don't know how much, with a few hundred centrifuges that are sophisticated, in a few weeks, actually, in principle, they can have it enriched to 90%. So in 4, 5, 6, 9 months, there is the danger of definitely a dirty bomb, and within a bit later than that, a danger of a simple bomb. So again, I'll say the danger of 10 sophisticated nuclear bombs is pretty much gone for a while, 3, 4, 5 years, who knows, perhaps more. The danger of 1 or 2 simple or primitive or dirty bombs is very much there. And it's in some ways, the operation may have increased the danger. Okay, I use the metaphor over and over again. Now I see that others use it. We shot the beast, or we shot and so the beast is much weaker, but it's more desperate, more angry, and still dangerous in a different way. So this is the overall. Now the specific scenarios are: 1, a dirty bomb; 2, a simple bomb; 3, a North Korean bomb. Seems unlikely. Most Israeli intelligence analysts think unlikely. There was talk of a Pakistani bomb, but Pakistan is too dependent on America. That seems to be much less. But North Korea can decide. So again, one of the good things that happened we talked about Israel and we'll talk about America. Look, in some ways we were lucky because we caught the Chinese-Russian bloc when it's still young and relatively weak. And you see the difference. America is still the only serious superpower. In 5 or 10 years' time, I'm not sure this would have been the case. So right now, by the way, the Chinese did help the Iranians rebuild their ballistic missile capabilities after we destroyed them in October. And I'm sure they'll help them, but they didn't intervene. We didn't have a kind of Cuba kind of crisis. We didn't have a kind of that kind of intervention. But all these scenarios we have to be aware of them. Okay, and then when we'll get to what should be done, we have to address it. And it all goes back to the decision making of the supreme leader, whoever replaces him. The supreme leader is tended to be cautious most of the time, but as someone who is on this call who knows Iran much better than me says, up to a few years ago, the Iranians or Persians were very smart. They lost much of their brains in the last few years. Their fanaticism took over their intelligence, and they made a series of strategic mistakes they wouldn't have made 5, definitely 10, 15 years ago. This we have to think about, because when they are facing this situation of being desperate, being in a corner, being humiliated, which is so important for them, whether they'll go for their Samson, obviously the rational decision for them and what all Iran would have decided is to have a deal, get rid of the sanctions, go back to civilian, economic buildup, and gradually rebuild their capabilities. They do have the know-how and have strategic patience. In 10, 15 years' time, another round. But we are not sure if they are the rational Iranians they were. And this is the major question mark of the day and of the coming months.
So, Ari, given where you say we are, we have two paths that I want to go down. One is the story of U.S. involvement, which is obviously a huge piece of this, and in particular, the interplay with President Trump. And then the second is how Israel will rebuild and defend itself against what you've just said. So trust me, everybody, we'll get to both, because if I start on one, everybody will text if they want to hear the other. We'll get to both. Let's start with the U.S., though. The simple question for me is, why did the U.S. agree to jump in when it did? And why did Israel agree to the ceasefire? So let's start in steps. My understanding is that, and you alluded to this earlier, that the story of the U.S. military planning and U.S. military role actually begins way before the last month. Why don't you set the stage a little bit for where we were at the time President Trump came into power the second time, and then we'll pick up from there.
Okay. So as I imagine, we have some Republicans and some Democrats on this talk. Let's talk about the history. The ironic thing, now I talk about a bipartisan American thing. The ironic thing that I don't think the American media picked up, I didn't read about it, that actually what Trump did is to activate Obama's military option. And I want to describe what happened. And this actually goes back to the talent, genius of Netanyahu and Barak when they were working together. Netanyahu and Barak terrified Obama so much that we are about to attack Iran, that they actually, I wouldn't say forced him or convinced him to create an American military option that didn't exist before. Now, what did they say? They say the way America does war is destroy the Air Force, the Navy, the anti-air, and then you are in war. And no president wants a war. And they said, do Israel with superpower capabilities. Do surgical. Do what we did in Iraq in 1981 and Syria 2007 with American capabilities. So if you look at the budgeting of these bombs, this begins in 2011, 2012, 2013. Now, Obama never thought for a moment of using it. He didn't even, I think, a major mistake on his behalf, even he didn't use it as a threat. But actually they've been training 14 years because ever since America had it in it that you need a robust, credible, as the word you use, the credible military option, and America had it. So that's the history of it. Later on, what happens is that, and this is the most essential part of the story. I mean, in some ways, the real hero of this drama is Ron Dermer. I know some people like him, some people don't like him. But basically, Ron Dermer goes to Mar-a-Lago in November 2024, and he has a 2-hour personal conversation with the President-elect Trump. And his arguments are very interesting. Basically, what he says to him, Biden lost his role as a world leader in some ways because of the failure of Afghanistan. You do Afghanistan in the reverse. You project power at the beginning of your presidency, and then you will not have to use power again because the Chinese and the Russians will respect it. That's number one. Number two, he says, we have this military option. You have an opportunity to have a military operation that not one American soldier will be killed, no body bags. You will display American might in a way that was not displayed since Nagasaki, and you will lead to peace in the region. So they planted the idea. Now, again, Trump was susceptible to this because the Republicans had an anti-Obama, anti-GPOA agenda for years. So he had it. But as you know better than me, he also had the isolationist sentiment, and the guy doesn't like wars. The Israelis' conclusion was that Trump is not an isolationist. He just doesn't like long, stupid land wars. And they offer him a golden option. They said, we will, but Trump had his doubts. So he did try the diplomatic channel. Again, the Israelis were smart. Unlike in the past, the Israeli intelligence analysis was that the gap between the Iranians and Americans is such that there is no danger of a bad deal. So they were not pushing. They let Witkoff do whatever he wanted to do without nagging. Okay, they were involved, but the cooperation, the diplomatic and military corruption was intensifying dramatically. And then it's so, now again, I want to take a step back. Netanyahu, and at the time Barak, believed in this option since 2009. Basically, they believed that it will be, we will begin and America will join. This is the Churchillian thing. I mean, Netanyahu, what he likes to quote most is this line from Churchill's diary that the first night he slept like a baby in World War II was the night that the Japanese did Pearl Harbor, okay, and America joined the war, because his entire mission was just that. So that was a fundamental Netanyahu belief. Now suddenly it became practical. It became, Trump would have not joined if Israel did not become such a winner. Trump, to the best of my knowledge, had serious concerns, I don't want to use stronger words, about Israel after October 7th, whether Israel lost it, and he didn't respect us very much. He liked us, but he didn't respect us. After the success in Lebanon and Syria, Trump began admiring Israel. And when Israel proved in the first 3 days what wonders it's doing in Iran, he decided to join. So it was a combination of an option created a long time ago, a kind of basic understanding of Trump because of the dialogue with Dermer and Netanyahu back in November, December, that this is really important. He cannot ignore it. It's not about only Ukraine and China. And then seeing Israel as a winner, which convinced him to jump in. I'll just say one more thing about it. I think that there was part of the dialogue was that, and it's relevant to this day now, that if America wants to pivot east, if it wants to pull out of the Middle East in a sense, it needs a strong Israel and a stable system. Israel is the best aircraft carrier America has. And once the administration understood that being involved here actually is a way of not having more wars and actually not having a new, being bogged down to some messy war, then they were on. I'll finish with one sentence, which I think is very relevant to you as Americans who love Israel. The potential here is that actually what America did for the first time is to use smart power. America was very much weakened before because of the traumas of Vietnam, Afghanistan, and Iraq. And here there is a kind of corrective experience where you can actually use power and be an effective leading superpower without getting into a mess. And this has long-term implications for America and for American-Israeli relationship. And that was a very important part of that dialogue. Okay. So let's talk about the ceasefire. I had, in his last years, I had a rather close relationship with Prime Minister Sharon. His last year, active years. Afterwards, he had some years unactive. And in one of the nicest, Sharon was he had amazing charm. Contrary to others, you go into a meeting with Netanyahu, El Barak, or these people, you come out with gazillion brilliant ideas. They are very impressive. You talk to Barak, he talks to you about Spinoza and all that. You went to see Sharon. There was no intellectual genius or something, but he had this he was a kind of Russian farmer's wisdom, okay, farmer warrior's wisdom. And I remember a conversation when he told me, Ari, even when you win a war, you are much weaker. You're exhausted by war. Now, there are things I cannot talk about even in this intimate gathering. But in some ways, Israel is weaker. Strategically, Israel is so much stronger, and the opportunity is amazing. But we had to stop the war. So we were lucky, not lucky, we were talented enough that our offense was such that it put the Iranians in such trouble that they felt a kind of danger to the regime, and I'll say something about that in a second, that they wanted it too. But we needed to stop. And I'll say something again. I'll give a compliment to the government, and then I'll say where I'm worried about the coming months. Look, you all know I'm no supporter of this government. I oppose it very much. And we have in the cabinet, we have some really messianic extremists, and Netanyahu has his own messianic complex about himself. What was so striking that this war was run in a very unmessianic way, very cold-headed, very calculated, no euphoria. It was very impressive. So the goals of the war are very rational goals. Weakening dramatically the nuclear project, weakening dramatically the ballistic project, weakening Iran's ability to attack Israel, and leaving it at that. So there was no confusion in Israel. One, because in some ways we are also weaker, but also because the commitment to Trump not to drag him into a long war, it was essential to stop the war. There was no option of continuing this war. This does not mean the drama ends. And when I'll share some of concerns about the government and about what we may do in the coming months, we have to stick to this rational approach. What happened to us after 67, the amazing victory, we became drunken with the victory. We became a bit messianic regarding all kinds of issues. It led to the 70. First of all, we had an attrition war a month afterwards, after this great victory, and we had the failure of the 73 war. We should, on the one hand, be proud, be hopeful, but we have to be very cautious to keep this restrained, strategic, rational thinking. And again, when we talk about where should we take it, this has to be approached, not to be tempted by over-ambitious ideas that can be destructive and counterproductive.
So Ari, I want to turn in a moment to Gaza and also to the Abraham Accords and what else is happening in the neighborhood. But before we leave Iran, is there anything you want to share about how Israel can or will protect itself going forward? I know I guess your foreign ministers at Katz said we're not going to seek permission from the US to act. There may be a ceasefire, but we're going to defend ourselves. How fragile is all of this? And how does Israel protect itself if they still might have the makings of a bomb?
So this connects directly with what I just said. So thank you for this.
Yep.
For everything, and specifically for this one. Look, the dilemma of the day, and there are two schools of thought. There are two options. One is a settlement, an agreement, a second GPOA, and the other is to keep it open and to try to go for regime change. And I want to connect the dots. On the one hand, the people who don't want the second agreement say, we have an amazing, the regime is weak. We don't want to give them now money and legitimacy so they will be saving. But we have to be very much aware. Think of everything we talked about. Because although it was such an amazing victory, the danger is not over. If we don't have an agreement, a political agreement that finishes and actually expresses the military achievements, you may be driving the Iranians to the wall. And the danger that they'll go for some sort of Samson option, and there are different, dirty bomb, simple bomb, attacking Israel. Look, we should not be confused. They can decide we attack them now. They can decide one morning, they have still the capability with all our success. You may have 200 missiles landing on Tel Aviv all of a sudden, and they'll have my tendency, by the way, I'm still thinking about it because as I'd love to explain it. I want regime change. But I think that not closing this event and keeping it totally open is high risk right now. So I say, and again, to those Americans who are traumatized by the thinking of regime change, I say what America should do is not Iraq. America should do USSR. Don't do George W., do Ronald Reagan. The strategy has to be now, and with Americans' power, with the standing of Israel and America, to actually, and talking of missed opportunities, Obama missed the great opportunity of the 2009 rebellion in Iran. Later on, others missed the opportunity of the hijab rebellion in Iran. We should now, on the one hand, in my mind, try to close this event, okay? So the danger of something, we have to stabilize. We have to stabilize on the one hand, but not to forget that the real goal is to destroy Khomeini's and the Ayatollah's Iran. Until they are gone, we will not be at peace. The Middle East will not be at peace. So I'm giving you a bit of a complex message. I think the goal, strategic goal, should be the right kind of regime change, but it has to be done wisely, because if we keep this thing open now, then you can, what is right now such an amazing victory with amazing implications and potential may become messy, and you don't want that.
And we can assume the Mossad and the IDF will keep on doing what they've been doing and be vigilant.
So I think that, thank God, we look, one of the mistakes done by Israel and America over the years, that we didn't have enough work. There was so much amazing work on clandestine work, gathering information, as we all see, not enough work done on regime change in the right way. Not enough influence and using cyber and all the things, all the things.
Right.
I think people woke up in both establishments, and I'm hopeful, but it has to be done in a really smart and had I been a politician, I would not put it as the goal, because then it's counterproductive. But I think we need a clear, long-term, quiet regime change strategy that yet does not take the risks of messy events that can ruin some of the success we just achieved.
So this is, now let's turn then to the neighborhood. There's a lot of belief here, reporting here, that this action, particularly by the president, risking his coalition, et cetera, is because he has a grand plan for peace in the Middle East, and that the focus is now moved on to trying to get a Gaza deal, a deal that will free the hostages and leave Hamas to the future, and then potentially turn to expanding the Abraham Accords. So can you just talk through really a little bit more specifically what's happening in Gaza? Do you have any optimism that the current talks there will now follow? And then second, let's talk about the Abraham Accords and what else might be happening with the other countries in the region. But let's start on Gaza and the hostages.
Okay, so the reason I'm cautiously optimistic on Gaza is three things. We have a weak Hamas, strong Bibi, and an impatient Trump. So the fact that Hamas is so much weaker, they lost much of the context of radicalism in the Middle East, puts them in an impossible situation. They're desperate for a deal. Bibi now is stronger regarding the extremists who didn't let them do the deal. I believe Bibi wants, I think Bibi is in pain over the hostages and he wants it, but he didn't want to stop the war before. There is a huge difference between stopping the war a year ago when Yahya Sinwar was alive, Hassan Nasrallah was alive, Hezbollah was at our border, the Iranians were there. Now with all these achievements, it really makes sense to close. I don't think we can have a final agreement for Gaza, but I think that the chances of the Witkoff thing happening are higher than ever. And we'll connect it with the region. The only way you can turn it into an end of war in Gaza is to connect it with the Saudi deal. What you will have, if we will have a partial deal on Gaza, you'll have 60 days, and these are 60 critical days, because America and Israel will try to get the Saudis and the others, because again, for Bibi to accept some sort of Hamas presence in Gaza, he needs something big, much bigger than that. So if you have some sort of regional peace of this way or another, that will give him the ability to live with a compromise or messy compromise in Gaza. So if I may, let's go to the region. I'll make it very brief because the most of the attention right now is actually on Syria. As I told you, Syria was the key to war. Now it's the key to peace. The feeling is that there is a limited window of opportunity, that if this new regime in Damascus, in a year's time, either they'll be gone or they won't need us. Right now, they're desperate. They need so much money and investment and peace that they are desperate. So there are two questions here. One, the ability to bring investments, mainly Saudi and so on, into Syria, lifting American sanctions. AIPAC will have a major role there, and coming to some sort of agreement about the Golan Heights. Israel will not give up the Golan Heights. It's still an issue for the Syrians. So you will need something like an agreement how not to agree, that will be decided in 10 years or something in diplomatic. You'll need some creative ambiguity, as Kissinger said. So, but I don't know. Some people tell me it's 30, 40, 50, 60% chance, but that's number one. Number two is Lebanon. If Syria comes along, there is a high chance of doing something with Lebanon. Again, it's more complicated. It may not be peace, but non-belligerency or something. Again, Lebanon is a model for what I talked about Iran, the right kind of regime change. Because what happened is the moment we beat the bad guys, the good guys, the moderates have more power to stabilize their country. We didn't, in 1982, we tried to put our own president in Lebanon. Didn't work, just like you failed in Iraq. But when you weaken the radicals, the moderates have more opportunity and guts to deal themselves. So we have an organic, natural political process that continues the war. And that's what you want. So there's amazing news coming out of Lebanon, most of it not shared totally. There is a potential there. Regarding the Saudis, that's the big one, because the implications are huge. On the one hand, there is a greater chance because Israel is now, Israel is now a kind of superhero. And when you live in the Middle East, you need to be a superhero if you want the people. By the way, it's needed in the White House as well. You need both the White House and the Middle East to perceive you as a superhero. So we are there now. Now we have to use it in the right kind of way. The problem with the Saudis is that to some extent, the glue that made the Arab-Israeli secret alliance is somewhat gone, because it was the fear of the Iranians. When you are less afraid of the Iranians, the need is less dramatic. And this is where American leadership is so needed. You need Trump and his team to really put the pressure, because, again, the opportunity is there, and we'll see about that. And that, of course, if that will happen, then you have Saudi Arabia doesn't only have money and oil. It has a kind of religious standing as a Muslim leader. So then you can have a kind of Jewish Islamic kind of rapprochement. And, Indonesia and the rest of things, again, I don't want to, it may not happen, but the potential to, in 2 words or in 3 words, it's a moment of from war to peace. It's a war and the potential is huge. It may or not happen, but it would be stupid not to seize the opportunity. And in the coming months, amazing things can happen in the coming months. But it really depends on the Arab leaders, on Netanyahu and his team, and very much on Trump and his team.
But do you think there's alignment then with the U.S. and Bibi's team that these options are there and that it's time to move and that there is at least some measure of optimism? I mean, is this Ari speaking, or is this also reflecting because from a little bit of what we hear about what Witkoff is saying, et cetera, it seems that this is almost a step-by-step plan at this point.
Look, in a sense, this plan was there for years. I mean, we were very close to peace with Saudi Arabia 7-10 years ago. And in many ways, October 7th happened because the deal with Saudi Arabia was so close. So American presidents of all parties were aware that there is this golden opportunity. It's very important for America, not only because of the oil, which you now don't need, because of the way you want to arrange the world vis-a-vis China and so on. So, look, I've been writing about the American Arab-Israeli alliance for more than a decade. Okay, more than a decade. Huge potential. We miss opportunities. This war, the weakening of Iran. I'll give you another small story. Many of my friends in the Israeli business community told me that they had business with Emirates, with Qatar, with the Saudis. The phone stopped ringing on October 8th. Because when we were perceived as weak, they were not there. After Lebanon, in October 24, suddenly the phone was ringing. Now, the phone is shouting. I mean, they see us as superheroes again, and they want the logic of our technology and what we can do together is very much there, as I said. But there is a Palestinian issue. The Saudis will not come without a Palestinian dimension. And here, whether Netanyahu is able to get out of the grip of his extremist partners and do something even symbolic, a bit like he did with the Bar-Ilan speech. Nothing happened with the Bar-Ilan speech, but and this will lead perhaps to who is the Netanyahu we will meet in a week or two or a month. Whether he wants to take this moment and to go back to the center and try to unite Israel and to have regional peace and have an amazing legacy, or whether he'll go the way of extremism and being vindictive and say, you didn't believe me, you never realized how great I am, here I am, and I'm coming back with rage. So I don't have a clue, but the major drama is who Netanyahu will be, and I think the potential of peace. I mean, if there will be regional peace, also the Israeli judiciary system will have to find a way to end this grotesque trial and to come to some compromise on that. And we will need, there is a potential of a kind of regional deal, political deal, judicial deal that will really create a better future, but it calls for some work.
Okay, let me stop you there for a second, because I want to shift to domestic politics generally. First of all, I assume that Bibi has great support for what has happened with Iran among the people, but maybe you could talk a little bit about that. I was curious whether any leaders emerged in this prior war that are now on the stage, anybody else that the Israeli public has come to respect or to know whom they hadn't before, or whether the focus really has just stayed on Bibi. And then I want to get to the court case a little bit separately, because President Trump has obviously jumped into that twice, trying to get it dismissed. And that will lead me to another question, which you can wrap them all together if you want, which is, to what extent is Trump now really calling the shots in Israel? To what extent is he using the appearance of, I guess he's now threatened military aid or whatever? Can Israel say no to him? And how are they going to deal with him going forward? But start on Bibi's strength, and then let's move on to the court case and how he will deal with Trump going forward.
So the one young unknown leader who came out of this war, you never heard his name, is Mr. Netanyahu. Okay, he was reborn. Okay, and after dying so many times. Now that doesn't mean he will. I'm not sure he will run again. Like, I'm not sure. I feel it's like possible, highly possible that he won't, but who knows? But also the fact that right now it's such a stunning success. His hero is Churchill. Churchill lost the elections in 1945. Okay, so it's not clear yet, and the polls are mixed. There are different kind of polls. So. But obviously, when I talk to people, when you go in the street, you asked about alternative leaders. All the alternative leaders are weaker. All of them are weaker. By the way, possibly the left-wing, Yair Golan, is less because his constituency is solid. But all these people in the center-right, Bennett, Lieberman, Gantz, Eisenhower, they are much weakened by this, okay? Much weakened. So we'll see. But it's Israel, it's 2025, anything can happen. I don't know what will happen. What I do want to say...
When do elections have to happen?
by the end of next year, by October, of 2000. Okay. But they may happen before.
Right.
Again, if I were giving advice to Netanyahu, I will tell him, you did war, do peace in the second half of 2025, and in 2026, say you are leaving and create a unity government that will deal with Israel's internal issues, because the one terrible thing that there's no doubt about, the guy divided this country. It's not only his fault, some of the others were fault, but if he wants to close his legacy, that I think would be the best advice to end the internal fight in Israel, to begin the internal healing. That would be an amazing, last act, and then he can resign, go give $1 million lectures wherever. But I'm not sure. Is there? We don't know. We don't know about that. But I do want. There is a point that I don't know if you saw that I was quoted in Tom Friedman's article a few days ago, and I think that's a very important point. This war, this run, the 12-day war, was won by Weizmann Institute Israel. It was won by the engineers, the scientists, the pilots, the intelligence people. They are the people who come out of Israel's free society, and they want Israel as a free society and as a liberal democracy. The greatest danger is that if we will have an extreme government, that they'll say, okay, so now, because the left was so wrong politically, and they didn't give an alternative, and Netanyahu was proven right now, and so on. But if the outcome will be that the Smotriches and the ultra-Orthodox and the ultra-nationalists will lead the next government, and the Weizmann Institute that was attacked by the Iranians will be attacked from within, then there will be a curse and a blessing. So for me, you know me, I'm into centrist politics, and I want a strong Jewish democratic Israel that is a free society, that is a frontier democracy, that combines Athens and Sparta. In an almost miraculous way, the pilots and the engineers did what the politicians didn't do. That Israel didn't die in 1970 because but we must maintain it. The challenges are not over. So it'll be a tragedy if the political outcome of the war will be putting the Weizmann Institute Israel in the corner again. And I think this is an essential mission for all of us who care. I mean, we need a much more united Israel that combines our Jewish heritage and tradition with democratic liberal values, and we must maintain that balance. And I'm slightly troubled there. What was your next question?
About the court case. Now, as you probably know, and I don't know if others on the call know, President Trump is now, whatever his version of tweeted twice, about how outrageous it is that the case is continuing and that it must be stopped, and kind of threatened Israel if it doesn't stop. And I'm just interested in how that's landing in Israel, whether you think it's likely to have any impact. I guess the president is allowed to put an end to it if he wants. Is that likely to happen? And will that tear the country apart again now that it's united?
Okay, so there are two issues. Let's talk about the judicial and then talk about President Trump. So I don't want to quote right now Trump. I want to quote a different gentleman, somewhat older, to whom I have a great respect, Aaron Barak. Aaron Barak is the high priest of liberal judicial Israel. And he says we should come in agreement to end this trial. By the way, he tried it 5 times in the past, and the radical left and the radical right did not let him do it. So if Aaron Barak, who is the iconic liberal judicial figure, says this trial is, now I'll say what I say, we should end it. We should find a civilized way of ending it. Now, I'm telling you, I've been there all along. I think that this trial is unpleasant to Netanyahu, but it really endangers Israeli rule of law. It really endangers Israel. Look around the globe. I don't know one democracy where the president or the prime minister is being kept in trial for years for cigars and champagnes. I don't know. You tell me if I'm wrong. Perhaps I missed something that happened in Germany or France or Britain, America. I don't know of anything like that. So if you want to impeach a prime minister or a president, you do it in a political way on political arguments, not on minor judicial issues. So there was something wrong. Now, what happened during the trial, by the way, I thought that from day one, and I can say worse things I don't want right now. There was flaw there, okay? But it turned out, you saw what happened in the court. Again, those of you who didn't see, these cases are collapsing. They are disintegrating, most of them. So obviously, Netanyahu did some things that are wrong, and they should be dealt with. But this trial split the nation. I said, Netanyahu says he's a Dreyfus. He's no Dreyfus. He's no saint. But the trial was like a Dreyfus trial in the sense that it split society. So if we want remedy, if we want to heal our wounds, and we want a new beginning, part of the deal is that this trial has to end. I don't need Trump's help for that. I said years ago that one of Israel's, because of what happened with Netanyahu, never mind on which side you are, we, on the one hand, have to end the Netanyahu era, but we have to end it peacefully. We cannot, and I couldn't care about him. I care about his voters. You cannot, the damage that this is doing to our democracy is very deep. So I hope that we'll have the reason, post-war kind of reason to deal with it. President Trump, thank you very much. I may agree or not disagree with what you say. That's not your role. Please lead America, make America great again, create a wonderful, stable, prosperous world. Don't interfere with Israel's legal. One of the beautiful things about Israel, that we do have an amazing system, and it is a living democracy. We don't need chaperoning from anyone else.
Okay, now what about the more general issue of President Trump? He presumably is extraordinarily popular in Israel now for having jumped in, taking political risk here, jumping in, but now maybe acting like he kind of is in charge. What is the Israeli view of, he says there has to be a ceasefire, you must bring your planes home. Would Israel feel free to use them again? He says you have to dismiss the court case. Would Israel feel free to do it in its own way? How much is there a sense that he is calling the shots? And how much is there a sense, at least internally, that, well, that's who he is and we'll do what we want to do?
Look, Israel is one of the countries where Trump was most popular. And when I tried to explain it years ago, I said Israelis felt for years that they are the victims of political correctness, that the political correct West, America, Europe, doesn't understand where we live, and therefore they were attracted to this politically incorrect figure. So that was true always. Obviously, after Fordo, he's very, very popular here. That's obvious. But I think that this kind of, I think many people are beginning to feel uncomfortable because we'd like him to talk a bit about Ukraine again or about immigration. We are too much in his tweets. Okay, so I think there is a sense that right now it's the Israeli right that enjoyed his blessing. I think with what may happen soon, I think that many people on the Israeli right will regret supporting him so much. So I think, again, first, one, I always say it in this conversation, first of all, gratitude to America. Two, gratitude to him. He did have the guts to do something others failed to do. But, no need for admiration or, we have to be, we must, part of our recovery, we must go to a bipartisan approach regarding America. I don't want Israel to be associated with one of the parties. I really think, and I think in this sense, bringing about peace is so important. So Israel, because again, with all the amazing success, I don't want to be Israel associated only with wars and killing. I think it's time that we'll be a kind of lighthouse nation that is not only part of the world's problems, but part of the world's solutions. And I think that's very important to do. And I think we may have an opportunity to do that.
Well, all right, this is fantastic. I just want to give you a chance to talk a little bit as we wrap up. And if anybody has questions, send them in to us. We have a few more minutes. But Ari, you spend so much time thinking about the path ahead, and you have alluded to that a little bit. But talk just for a moment about how Israel can put itself back together in the way that you are so focused on, what the priorities have to be now that there is this moment of potential strength and unity.
So again, I'll say very briefly, many of you heard me before, and I'll be delighted to talk about it again in the future. I think there is an amazing opportunity. Israel has to be rebuilt politically from the center right. Again, and the way all the people, we have to free ourselves from the rule of ultra-nationalists and ultra-Orthodox extremists. And I think there is an opportunity. Again, when you look at the last almost 20 years, or 22 years, I mean, since October 7th, the amazing recovery, the amazing Israeli society, Israeli army, resilience, solidarity. We have to take all these values and create the post-war Israel. And, I always admired the people, the architects of post-World War II world in Europe and throughout the world. I think they did an amazing job. It's not equivalent, it's not one-to-one, but we cannot be just good in wars. It doesn't fly. So we have to take all this positive energy, more unity, more solidarity, but again, maintaining the Jewish democratic balance. That's so important. And I think that's our mission now. And, if we've done the impossible in war, let's do the possible in peace.
Well, I thank you for this. I don't know if you have anything further that you wanted to say about Iran, about the neighborhood that we didn't cover. We've covered a tremendous amount this morning. I've learned a lot. I hope others have also, and I'm deeply grateful. But Ari, I just wanted to make sure you had the last word on all of this, if there's something that we didn't touch on that's on your mind.
So it's just, on the one hand, let's be cautious because bad things can still happen. It's no euphoria. Okay. On the other hand, I really think that we all had the privilege to live through an amazing period of time with so much suffering, so much agony, and the way Israel is coming out of it right now is quite astonishing. And I think that it should inspire us all and lead us to do much more work, to maintain this amazing Israel.
And let's hope at the next Ari Zoom, we're celebrating the end to the war in Gaza, which I know is obviously tearing the country apart, and would be a wonderful way to reunite that way also.
Absolutely.
On behalf of everybody who's listening, you and Nicole have done such a remarkable job in informing us, instructing us. This is a rare discussion where knowledge and wisdom went hand in hand. So thank you to you both. Ari, thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Thank you very much.